CTV News at 5 with Hudson Mack.
Good evening, I'm Andrew Johnson. Hudson Mack is off tonight. A fish farm north of Tofino is under quarantine after the discovery of a deadly virus among the farm's salmon. All of the salmon at Mainstream Canada's Dixon Bay farm will likely be destroyed in the wake of the discovery. The virus is known as IHN and it kills 100% of the Atlantic salmon exposed to it. It was discovered during routine testing on Monday. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency is now investigating and is expected to be on site at the farm tomorrow. Mainstream says the disease does not pose a risk to wild Pacific salmon because they have built up an immunity to it. Fish farm opponents disagree.
Because the fish are so unnaturally packed into these open cages, the diseases in the cages are amplified. And so in the case of an outbreak like this, there would be 60 billion particles of pathogens per hour entering the water. So any wild salmon that are swimming past that farm are going to be swimming through all of this disease. And at that level of disease, it's very, this fish are basically going to contract that disease, and it is deadly to them in that kind of concentration.
This is the first diagnosis of IHN among farmed Atlantic salmon in BC since 2003. Two men accused of helping smuggle Tamil migrants into BC almost 2 years ago made a brief appearance in a Vancouver court today. The appearance lasted only minutes while the judge set a bail hearing for June 5th. The men, Leslie Jana Emmanuel and Kuna Robinson Krista Raja, are charged with organizing the smuggling of almost 500 Tamil migrants into BC waters aboard the MV Sunsea in the summer of 2010. A third man has been arrested in France on the same charge, and Ottawa is seeking his extradition back to Canada. Immigration Minister Jason Kenney and Public Safety Minister Vic Taves congratulated the RCMP for its investigation, saying Canada won't tolerate abuse of the immigration system. There were 492 people aboard the boat when it landed. So far, just 6 of the migrants have been accepted as refugees. The Coastal Fire Centre is banning open fires and fireworks up and down Vancouver Island this May-long weekend. The ban is in effect due to tinder-dry conditions on the Mid and South Island. The ban does not prohibit campfires that are a half-metre high by a half-metre wide or smaller, or any portable cooking stoves. The Coastal Fire Centre says forest floors are drying and there is an increased risk of surface fires. It says if you do plan to have a campfire, make sure to have at least 8 liters of water nearby to properly put it out. The ban will be in place until September 15th. And proof today that it is tinder dry out there. Firefighters were called to Colquitts Park behind Tillicum Mall and Saanich after reports of rising smoke and a very small brush fire. Fire crews snuffed the fire out within minutes of arriving. The latest numbers show the future of BC's economy looks bright. The Conference Board of Canada says the province's economy is forecast to grow nearly 2.5% this year and another 3.4% in 2013. It says forestry is expected to grow as the U.S. housing market improves, and mining, manufacturing and construction will continue to be strong. BC's growth forecast of 3.4% next year is just ahead of Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and only just behind Alberta. Premier Christy Clark is keeping busy on her Asia trade mission. Today, she made a stop at a liquefied natural gas facility. Clark saw firsthand how a liquefied natural gas terminal works. The tour follows the announcement of an LNG export facility near Kitimat and a memorandum signed between the province and a Japanese oil company. Clark says BC has the natural resources and is North America's shortest route to Asia to help supply demand for LNG. Japan and Korea are currently the top 2 importers of liquefied natural gas in the world.
There we are. There's a real
The Premier also met with buyers of BC's seafood exports at a fish market in Tokyo. Christy Clark pointed out Canadian sockeye salmon in the bins. Tomorrow, Clark heads for Korea to continue her job and trades mission.
Best beef going. BC beef.
Back home, people were celebrating the sizzle for BC Beef Day. Hundreds of people gathered for a barbecue on the back lawns of the legislature today. BC's Agriculture Ministry says it's trying to get more beef products on grocery store shelves and beef up its trade with Asia.
Alberta, Saskatchewan, we're heading over to Asia to make sure that we can help break down some of the trade barriers and make sure that the access to the Asian market is there. We want to also grow BC beef consumption in British Columbia. It's a great product. It's a great story. British Columbians love the product. We got to make sure that they have easy access to it as possible.
The goal is to grow the agriculture industry to a $3.5 billion industry by 2017. Police forces in the capital region are teaming up and cracking down on dangerous drivers. Police are trying to prevent this. Drivers speeding past emergency vehicles. This Campbell River RCMP officer had a brush with death after a driver nearly took him out, hitting the mirror of the car he was standing beside instead. Today, officers were pulling over drivers on the Pat Bay Highway, reminding them to obey the rules of the road as they launched their Slow Down and Move Over campaign. Police are issuing warning tickets to drivers for the rest of the month who do not slow down when approaching an emergency vehicle at the side of the road. But starting June 1st, police say you'll be paying the price if you don't follow the law.
My biggest fear is not so much being hit and killed, because if I'm dead, I'm dead. My fear is knowing that there's going to be a police officer going to my house, talking to my wife and children and saying, your husband is dead, he's not coming home tonight.
BC law requires that on a highway of 80 kilometers an hour or more that individuals slow down to 70 and move over into the left-hand lane.
More than 40 emergency workers have been killed or seriously injured while helping people on BC roads since 2001. If you are caught failing to slow down and move over, it could cost you $173 and 3 demerits. A horticulture display in the capital region is making a big splash. A mother and baby orca can be spotted on the corner of Humboldt and Government Street in the form of a 3-dimensional garden display. Crowds were forming as crews used a crane to assemble the display's frame today in front of the Empress Hotel. The orcas are made up of a variety of annuals. Gardeners say they've been preparing for this moment since March.
The planting is fairly simple. It takes 2 gardeners 3 days or so to plant it. It's not a big deal to plant it. Stuffing it from frame out is a big project. We're looking at a couple of weeks of filling it with soil. It's a mix of soil and sand, and we have to pound it in. It's covered in shade cloth. It's quite a job to actually fill it and prepare it for planting.
This is the 3rd year in a row the orcas are making downtown Victoria their home. They'll be on display until October. A First Nations fisherman from Port Alberni is recovering in hospital after a violent attack following a confrontation on the water. The fisherman was traveling by boat down the Alberni Canal on Saturday when he came into contact with some jet skiers. It's not clear what happened, but it is believed there was some sort of argument. Later that day, the fisherman ran into the group of 4 men at a Petro-Canada on River Road. They began assaulting him, and the attack only stopped when an off-duty RCMP officer intervened.
Words were exchanged and an assault occurred. 3 males assaulted the victim, the fisherman. He sustained a broken leg, cuts and abrasions. He reported it to us, and our investigation led us to 4 suspects who were arrested last night, 2 adults and 2 young persons. And this morning we're recommending charges against 3 of them, 1 adult and 2 young persons for assault causing bodily harm.
The victim had to be rushed to hospital where he underwent surgery for a severely broken leg. Nanaimo is changing the way it enforces parking in the city's downtown. By the end of the year, parking enforcement will transition to an in-house model, and the city will sever its contract with Robbins Parking. The city's parking enforcement officers will also carry out bylaw enforcement and act as ambassadors for the city.
We've been actually looking for the last year or so at the concept of having an integrated enforcement service with our bylaw officers. So what we were looking for is a patrol service that did bylaw enforcement, was ambassadorial for our downtown, and did the parking enforcement as one person, a city person with a city uniform.
A new parking manager, 3 new enforcement officers, and 1 administrative support person will be hired for the transition.